Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February 18 meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 23 signing of the Acts of 23, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling 508-945-4410, again 945-4410, and enter conference ID 939-134-854, #, 939-134-854, #, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We will, however, post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So we are going to continue today our review of the proposed 26 warrant articles, including the CPA articles, sewer capital articles, the transfer station article, and that's about it. So with that, roll call, Tommy Doan. Tommy, can you hear me?
Here.
Right up. Barbara is not here. John Papalardo.
Here.
Joanne Sprague.
Here.
Andy Young.
Here.
Kristen Andres.
Here.
Lucy Shields.
Here.
Eric Whiteley.
Here.
And the chair is present. So with that, Carrie, would you like to read us in, or?
Sure.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So today we have the FY 2026 budget for community preservation articles. And we have the FY 2026 sewer capital articles and the FY 2026 transfer station article to be presented. We have the chair of the Community Preservation Committee, Gary Tennyson, here. And I'll just go over a little bit. The budget requests for this year are $2,358,035. That includes 7 projects, and 1 for the 10% to the reserve funds, and 1 for funding the administrative budget for FY 2026. And Gary will go over the details of the budget.
Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Gary. I'm Gary Tennyson, the chairman of the Chatham Community Preservation Committee. As you can see, we're recommending approval of 9 warrant articles this year. All 9 will total $358,035. The first 7 on this list are the ones that result from applications that have come into the CPC. We received 8 applications this year. We're recommending 7. We had unanimous committee approval for all 7 of these. If those first 7 are approved, that would be a commitment of $1,923,035, which is really kind of the what we're committing out of our budget. In addition to that, we're asking for $15,000 for our administrative expenses. And as Carrie mentioned, as we do every year, we're recommending that 10% of our annual revenue be put into the reserve accounts for open space, community housing, and historic preservation in order to meet the statutory requirements of the CPA Act. So we put those funds into the reserve accounts, but then we turn around and take them out in order to support the other projects that we're recommending. So it's a little bit of a double counting that leads to the figure of $2,358,000 there. So as I mentioned, our annual revenue, the reason we're putting $140,000 from each, $420,000 total, into that is that our annual revenue is estimated revenue, $1,361,417. So we want to put a little bit more than that in, and that leads to the 140,000 that we put into each of the reserve accounts. So should we go through each of these one at a time?
I think if we could please, Gary, that'd be terrific. Thank you.
Okay. So the first one is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That comes up to us from the Department of Community Development. We've been putting the CPA has been putting funds into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the past few years. In fact, I think we're the primary funder of the trust fund. Previous CPA grants that have been made have allowed the trust fund to purchase 4 properties in town that are all in the beginning stages now of being developed for affordable housing. This grant of $500,000 will kind of replenish the trust fund so that they have sufficient funding available to respond to additional opportunities for purchase of land for affordable housing.
Gary, Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tennyson. After we spend the $500,000, what would be our reserve in the Affordable Housing Trust? How much money do we have in the bank?
Carrie, do you have a more accurate figure on that? I think it's about $3 million, but
If before or after we would spend this $500,000?
I'll have to get back to you on exact numbers for where we are at, but there's currently around roughly $650,000 in fund balance, and then we're estimating $1,361,417 for estimated receipts, so that leaves around $2 million coming in for FY 2026. We haven't closed FY 2025 yet.
I think what she was asking was how much is in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
On the reserves,
No, in the fund itself, right?
Yes, after we spend the $500,000, what's left for the future?
In the CPA reserves?
The Affordable Housing Trust,
In the trust?
or, well, I'd like to know both, really.
I think when Gloria McPherson presented this to us, she indicated that they would like to have somewhere between $2 million and $3 million in the trust in order to respond, and that this would, I think, move them pretty close to $3 million available in the trust fund.
let me just take a look and I'll see and we'll, okay?
Yes, and just one more quick question. How much does our surcharge bring us in every year?
Well, it varies from year to year, of
Yeah,
course.
approximately.
And this year,
It's 3% is what our CPC is set at, but it does vary based on our taxes.
Yeah,
the
but-
surcharge plus the state contribution, I do have that figure.
Yeah,
is-
that's like the last year or
Yeah, this year, the estimate is $1,361,417, which I think is pretty close to what it was last year as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I will just briefly note that I think Gloria may be on the call. So Gloria, if you are and have insight into the balance of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that might be helpful. Or perhaps not. All right, Gary, back to you, please. She's back.
Do you want to take action on these after I present each one, or at the end, do all of them?
I think what we'll probably do is give it some consideration rather than take a vote today. Give the committee an opportunity to think about each of these things, given that there's 8 of them. And then we'll take a vote sometime in the next couple of days, or a week and a half. Carrie?
So I have the balance of the Affordable Housing Trust. It's currently $2,669,266. And that was as of January 31st.
And that's before the 500 that we're.
That's before the
Right,
500
so once
gets
the
applied.
500 goes in, they'll have a little over $3 million.
That's correct.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to know.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, on to the next one, which is the Stallneck painting preservation. This application came to us from the Chatham Historical Society, and they're requesting, as you can see, $408,000 to restore and preserve the Stallneck paintings that are currently on display in the mural barn at Atwood House. Although the paintings are certainly very attractive, they are showing their age, they are peeling, and some of them are actually cracking. And so they need to be cleaned, they need to be professionally restored, and they need new glass glazing and reframing. So the society has identified professionals that can do this work. It's slow and tedious work. It'll be done off-season and in a sequential form. So the paintings, or at least a majority of the paintings, will still be on display as they're working on individuals or a small group of the paintings. It'll take probably a 2-year period for the professionals to get this work done. I think certainly our committee, and I imagine many of you, consider those paintings to be one of the real historic treasures here in town, and the committee strongly recommends approval of the grant for this purpose.
Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Tennyson, can you tell us who these professionals are and where they're from? So we know a little bit about their history and why we're choosing them.
I cannot right off the bat.
Who makes the final decision? Because those are very important and
Yes.
historical, and I think we want to be very careful about who we put to work in there.
Yeah, I think the Historical Society is going to be very careful.
Yeah.
In fact, in the presentation that they gave to us, they indicated that the previous time that these paintings were restored, they weren't done, at least in the way that they would be done today with some of the newer techniques that are available. So they certainly have searched and identified professionals that can do this work. And it's the society that'll make that final decision.
Well, I think I'd like to be satisfied eventually as to who's going to do it and what their credentials are.
We can get you that information.
Okay, thank you.
Assuming that they've made the final decision.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes these organizations like to have the money before they make a final decision on these types of contracts.
Kristen, please.
Thank you. Gary, can you just tell folks who might not know what these paintings are, what the subject is?
Well, as I understand it, they are paintings of Chatham residents that were done in the 30s and 40s, I believe. So they have a real connection to the history of Chatham, not just that they were done by a well-known artist who happened to live in Chatham, but that they also depict people and events from Chatham's history.
Well, and they're allegorical as well. Alice Stallneck, whose son actually ended up, who's painted a number of Chatham subjects as well, ended up as the head of the art department at UCLA. They're allegorical, one of which is Christ preaching to the multitudes, and there's town residents representing all the various figures in these murals, and they're really rather remarkable and notable. As someone who has a fair bit of experience in preservation of art collection, I agree with Joanne's point. I think it'd be interesting for this committee to know, and I can reach out to the Historical Society. But I think it'd be interesting for us to know the qualifications, because not all restorers are good restorers. So given the content and given the amount, I think it would be useful to know exactly who they're proposing to use and what their qualifications are. So I can reach out to the society.
Yeah, just to repeat, I think they actually learned their lesson the last time when I think they went with somebody more local rather than somebody from the Boston area who's has a real reputation in as restoration of important paintings.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions on the Stolneck murals? Okay, thanks, Gary.
All right, the next one is the reconstruction of the Nickerson Historic Barn. This application came to us from the Nickerson Family Association. What they're doing is requesting a second grant of $275,000 for the reconstruction and preservation of a historic barn which was owned by William Nickerson II, who was the son of William Nickerson I, the founder of Chatham. It was built in the 1700s. The previous grant, which was for $300,000, enabled for the meticulous deconstruction of the barn, which at that time was at 68 Shell Drive. Then the components that were deconstructed were moved to the Nickerson Family Association campus on Orleans, and they've begun the process of putting the barn back together and restoring the barn. And this grant will allow the continuation of that process. They're doing this in a way that basically replicates the original construction of the barn. So all of the tools that are being used and all of the methods are being used are the same ones that were used in the 1700s. So they've identified a lead carpenter and his assistants who do this kind of historical work. So where there was a wood peg joint, there's going to be a wood peg joint, and that peg's going to be developed using the tools that carpenters would have used back in the 1700s. They're going to document that whole process, and it's going to become an educational tool that's used in the barn to show people how it was done back then and how the barn was put back together with the funds from this appropriation. So I think once this is done, it'll become a key historic attraction in Chatham, and it'll become an educational tool for our residents and our visitors. And we recommend the second phase of funding for the second phase of this project.
Thank you, Gary. Tracy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So will this be a public space for people to come in, and is it then going to need to be manned by anyone, or it'll be just open to the public?
Well, the Nickerson Family Association has well, I think what they call it, the Caleb House on their campus now, and that's open for visitors, and they can learn about the homestead at that time and the original founding of Chatham. And this will just simply complement that. It'll be a space for meetings, for educational programs, and yes, it will be open. And because this is, the funds are coming from CPA, it will have a deed restriction on it that means that it has to be maintained as a historic property within Chatham. So it'll be historic, but it'll also be open and it'll be an educational facility.
Kristen, please.
Thank you. What's the overall cost of putting the barn back together? In other words, does 275 take care of that whole thing, or is the project more expensive than that?
No, the project is more expensive. The Nickerson Family Association has already committed $50,000 to the project, and we made the point in our discussions with them that our funds need to be used only for those components that are components of the project that our historic preservation. So, for example, they're going to be doing landscaping of the area around the barn. Some of the electronics that are going to allow it to be used for an educational purposes, that will all be funded either by the Family Association, or they're probably going to seek some additional grant funds from other sources. So our funding is really restricted to the historic preservation components of the project. And I would suspect that well over another $100,000 is going to be required to complete the other aspects of it.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. The next item is restoration of headstones at the Union Cemetery. This application comes to us from the town's cemetery department and the Chatham Cemetery Commission. And as you can see, what they're requesting is $50,035 to restore 127 historic headstones at Union Cemetery. And they've already identified all those 127 headstones, and we have a whole list of them in their application. This is the second phase of a long-term project that the Chatham Cemetery Commission has to really restore all of the historic headstones in the Chatham cemeteries. So a previous CPA grant allowed them to, or enabled them to do that at Seaside Cemetery. I think the results at Seaside Cemetery are quite spectacular, actually. You kind of almost didn't notice it as you came into town previously, but now as you come into town, you look up on that hill and you see all those kind of glistening white headstones up there, and I've walked around up there, and actually fascinating history to see who is there and the kind of the relationships of some of the people from Chatham's history. So this particular grant will move them on. The same people that did the restoration at Seaside will continue to do it at Union Cemetery, and I suspect we'll probably receive an application next year or the year after to move on to an additional cemetery.
Gary, is this predominantly cleaning, or is it repairing fallen stones, or
It's both.
how extensive?
It's
Okay.
both. So in some cases, they're fallen over or they're actually broken in two,
yep.
and there's ways that they can restore that. But a lot of it is cleaning, that you have that kind of orange-colored fungus that gets onto those stones, kind of depending on whether they're granite or some other material.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah. But again, it's a real professional that's doing the work, and it comes out quite nice.
All right, salt marshes.
All right, so those are the kind of the three history ones. We're going to move on now to three that are open space and recreation. The first one being, again, continued support for phase 2 of field studies of the salt marshes in Chatham. The salt marshes in Chatham are one of our major natural assets, but they're also a fragile asset, and they're under threat from climate change and sea level rise associated with climate change. And so a previous grant that that CPA awarded to basically the Natural Resources Department, along with the Energy and Climate Action Committee, enabled them to hire the Center for Coastal Studies in Providence to conduct field studies that projected what the impact of sea level rise and other climate change would be on those salt marshes. In that initial study, it was 4 salt marshes on the Nantucket side of Chatham. and to put together a plan that will help to preserve those salt marshes going forward. That study is nearing completion, and this funding will enable them to do similar field studies on the kind of the 9 remaining salt marshes in Chatham. And that'll include Muddy Creek, Phosphorus Creek, Strong Island, and 6 others. So we were pleased with the results of the initial phase and recommend support for phase 2. And that should pretty much cover the salt marshes in Chatham and finish the project.
Tracy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once the recommendations are received, who then will be doing whatever the mitigation, I assume, efforts are to preserve the salt marshes?
Yeah, well, the application comes from the Natural Resources Department and the Energy and Climate Action Committee. So it really kind of becomes the town's responsibility. It probably will be related to the next warrant article that's up there. The town is going to be putting into place this open space and recreation plan. One of the primary reasons for doing that is in order to tap into state funding. And so I'm sure it's on the town's agenda to try to find whatever sources of support that they can from the state or from other sources in order to implement the plans that are result from this study.
I note that Kristen has a question, but just tangential to that before I move on from Tracy's question. Town manager is here as well as the head of natural resources. Any observations on Tracy's question about how the town is going to respond to these reports and the recommendations therein? Greg Berman. Welcome, Greg.
Hi there. Thank you. Greg Berman, your Director of Natural Resources. So this first phase amongst the 4 marshes along the Nantucket Sound shoreline, it's primarily a vulnerability assessment, a feasibility assessment, and some recommendations for what can be done to those marshes. This next phase does the rest of the marshes in Chatham and comes up with a prioritization system. So that's really why we have to do the rest of the marshes before we start prioritizing. And once we have that, we'll get a feel for, the level of effort, the level of effectiveness, how long, at what cost can we preserve some of these marshes, what are the methods involved? And really that's where the rubber hits the road to see where we're going to be using the methods in these marshes. So, once we have the results of all these, it's going to make for a much more comprehensive package that we can take to grant agencies. And if nothing else, there might be some, lower hanging fruit, whether it's, public and committees coming up with potential bylaw or regulation recommendations that don't have immediate direct costs versus some of the more alternative things like thin layer deposition that the state has some new guidelines on, and we might be exploring in the future if that's what's recommended by this.
That's helpful. Thank you. Kristen, please.
Thank you. So I guess probably for you, Greg, and the preliminary and the first study, I'm assuming one of the recommendations might be for open space preservation for salt marsh migration. And if that's so, have we already kind of got an inkling whether there's land to be still preserved for that purpose, which seems to me another open space CPA article in the future?
Yeah, I think that's, one of the rationales for how this, fits under open space for other reasons also, because it can identify areas that might be, purchased in the future for salt marsh migration pathways. That was one of the methods that was identified in the initial proposal and the initial study. And actually, later this afternoon is our first presentation by the Center of Coastal Studies to the Energy and Climate Action Committee. So hopefully we'll be getting a flavor, and the report will be within a few months.
All right. Gary, back to you, please. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, the next warrant article, which is quite relevant to the previous discussion, is the Town of Chatham 2025 Open Space and Recreation Plan. So this application came to the CPC from 3 town departments, the Community Development, Community Services, and Natural Resources. And what they're requesting is $50,000 for a town-wide project to develop a 7-year Town of Chatham Open Space and Recreation Plan. So this would be, as they say, a town-wide effort. They will hire an experienced consultant to work with the town on this, and they'll seek as much input from the public in developing this plan as they can receive. The resulting plan will then be submitted to the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Division of Conservation Services. Once that's approved by that division, it'll make Chatham eligible for state grants. There's a lot of these state grants that require a town to have such a plan. And then hopefully the town will be able to apply for some of those grants, receive those grants in order to implement the priorities that exist in this plan, and which may well involve salt marshes.
Kristen, please.
Thank you. I was around working for the town when we had our first open space plan, and the same amount of money was set aside for that plan. So my first question when I saw this is, how confident are we that we can get somebody for $50,000 to do a comprehensive open space plan? Or is this just building on the old one, which was never finished, which was just a draft?
Yeah, I've actually seen that old one and have used it on occasion. What they indicated to us in the application was that they'd already received a bid from one potential consultant, which was higher than $50,000. And they were going to seek additional bids and thought that they might come in at $50,000. But if not, that there was sufficient funds in each of the 3 departments that they could pony up enough to meet the additional cost.
I see Katie Donovan from Community Development approaching the microphone.
Thank you, Mr.
Hi, Katie.
Chairman. Again, Katie Donovan, Director of Community Development. We had sought a quote from a consultant to get an idea about what it would cost. The quote that we received, I think, was for $64,000. We had also reached out through the Mass Planners listserv and what other communities are paying. Communities of similar size were somewhere between $40,000 to $50,000. So we felt confident that asking for the $50,000, if we needed to each submit or put in a small amount to hit that $64,000, that we could do that. So we feel confident that we can get it done for that amount.
Kristen, please.
Thank you. I'll just offer a comment that was a long time ago when we did the first one, and we were just getting computers. So
Yeah.
I would imagine perhaps there's a savings now in the digital age. Thank you.
Thanks.
I might add that there is a lot of information in that first one, which will make this one somewhat easier, at least something to build upon.
John Papaletto.
Thanks. Just curious, the open space plan, is it considering affordable housing space too? I mean, how are those affordable housing initiatives and open space initiatives being measured against each other? Who's making the decision, and is there a prioritization at the state level for funding? Right, I mean, presumably this is being done as a first step to unlock state grants.
Yeah.
For open space, at the same time, the town and the state have prioritized affordable housing. So I'm just wondering, at what point do these 2 plans come together and trade-offs are evaluated?
I'll let you take that one.
Thank you. So, of course, we will always have competing priorities. But it's something that we need to look at both. And there are some initiatives now where there are groups that are looking at kind of a combination of open space and affordable housing, maybe a smaller, more dense development with some preservation of open space. This plan, I don't believe, has any requirement to address anything related to affordable housing. They are two separate plans. They're two separate, again, competing priorities. There's, as we know, that there's land that's appropriate for housing, and then there's land that's more appropriate to be preserved. And I think that we need to look, as we go through this process, there is a very robust community engagement process that needs to happen, and we will hear from the community about priorities through that process. So, again, they're always going to be competing. I think that's something that we see, but they're priorities. But they're both priorities for the town, and I think that we need to, follow what the state requirements are to make the plan what it needs to be for us to be able to seek those grants.
John, please.
Is there a stated target for open space, percentage of the town to be preserved?
Not that I'm aware. I had worked on a plan in a previous community many years ago. I don't recall that ever being something that we need to, not like the 10% for affordable housing. It's not, we don't need to get to a certain point for open space. But the other part of what this plan does is it helps us to prioritize work that needs to be done on existing conservation land, work that needs to be done on existing recreation land, and park facilities as well. So it helps us to, prioritize. It's almost like a roadmap of what we would like to do, not only with future parcels, but with parcels and parks that we already own.
So this plan will be looking at our current inventory and making recommendations as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Andy, do you have your hand up? All good? Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I understand what this plan will show us. Does it show us open space or land that can be purchased by the town for open space?
It
Or
can show
recreation?
us, it can show us parcels that we may want to prioritize for open space purchase, but it will also look at what we currently have preserved and look at plans for perhaps trails or maintenance, and not only conservation land, but also parkland. So if we need upgrades to any of our existing park facilities, it'll help us to prioritize those as we move through that process as well through the community.
Do we have any idea how much open space there is out there that's available? That we don't know that it's there, or how much it would cost us? Is that what this planning is going to tell us?
This plan will help us to look at what, potential parcels may be available or vacant. There may be areas, parcels that are not for sale that may be a targeted priority for open space in the future. So those are things that we'll look at with the consultant.
So the assessing department doesn't already have this information or know about it?
Well, they would know which parcels are vacant and which parcels are not, but they don't necessarily know. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're available for purchase or available for acquisition by the town for open space preservation. And they may be parcels that have a house on them, but they have a lot of, they have a large lot area. And so there may be an area to either be preserved in the future or redeveloped. So those are things that we would be looking at as well.
Okay, thank you.
I might add, I'm on the board of the Chatham Conservation Foundation. In fact, I'm the clerk. And the foundation will be working very closely with the town on this project because the foundation owns a lot of the open space, the salt marshes and the like in town. And we've been looking at what's available as well. And most of the open space that one might think about acquiring is a portion of a fairly large estate, if you want to call it that, a 3, 4, 5 acre lot with one house on it, where you might be able to, if not purchase a portion of that land to keep it at open space, to purchase or receive a conservation restriction on a portion of that land. And a lot of those potential pieces are actually adjacent to lands that the Conservation Foundation already has acquired. So they would be very important from a kind of an ecological corridor standpoint. And that's the kind of information that will hopefully come out of this study, is identify those kind of priority pieces where you might actually approach a landowner and convince them that there were certain advantages to them as well as the town in putting this into a conservation restriction, or maybe even donating it or selling it to the Conservation Foundation.
Well, I think that sounds like a good plan to me, if it can be accomplished through this, through this sort of plan. Or,
And I think this plan will identify where those opportunities are.
all right, thank you.
Tracy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems, although competing interests, that having a plan like this would help inform also sort of the housing plans in terms of properties that are best suited for one versus the other. To me, although competing, all of this sort of falls under conservation, in the sense, for me, affordable housing is an issue of conservation and conserving sort of the way of life, the year-round community, and livelihood in town as a value, such as our preserving our natural resources. And it seems the more information we have about the land that we have, the better choices we can make of what's best to be used for what, and using the data collected can help inform how you develop a parcel for affordable housing, such that the pieces of the parcel that can be preserved for these purposes are outlined.
I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Little Mill Pond Pier.
All right, the reconstruction of the Little Mill Pond Pier, that application came to us from the Natural Resources Division. And the existing pier on Little Mill Pond is in bad shape. If you've been out there, you'll know it is. And it needs to be completely replaced and upgraded. The estimated cost for this is $500,000. And the CPC committee recommends that the total amount be approved. They actually, Greg actually asked us for $250,000 as half of the cost, and he was going to go to the town meeting to try to get the other half approved. We actually had the funds in our open space and recreation reserve account, and he agreed that we could put the full amount in from the Chatham CPA fund. So, once this is complete, it will support numerous recreational activities. It'll also help with building resiliency into the coastline, and I think be a major asset for Chatham.
So Gary, as one who grew up fishing from and playing on that creaky old wooden pier, is this going to remain a creaky old wooden pier, or is it going to be a poured concrete structure like the trap dock, or what should we expect to see down there in the future?
Well, Craig's assured us it was going to be a sturdy, modern pier, but I'll let him tell you the details on what it will be made from.
So it is intended to replicate the look and feel of what's currently there. We are undergoing the design and permitting of it right now that was funded through a Wolf request. So as part of that, we'll get the methods, materials that are most cost efficient and additional to having the historic look and feel. Right now, we are exploring a very minor increase in length, just to hit a little bit deeper water, but not any large, really not crossing the threshold for a new Chapter 91 permit. So it should look very similar, just a little bit higher.
Okay, thank you. Should be interesting. Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the 7 applications that came into us that we are recommending. And as I indicated before, those 7 total $1,923,035. We're also recommending $15,000 to cover the committee's administrative costs. That includes, every year, there's a modest clerical support, but some years we have legal fees and surveying fees. If we're going to purchase land, that can wind up being fairly expensive with regard to the fees that we see. So we asked for $15,000. We usually wind up spending somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000, and the remainder just simply reverts to the CPA account. And then the final warrant article is just that warrant that we put forward every year in order to make sure that we meet the statutory requirements of 10% of the annual revenue going into open space, historical preservation, and community housing. And as I said before, that $420,000 actually winds up being, we put that warrant articles first, so that the money's in the reserves if the town approves it, and then we go ahead and use it to fund the other projects that are coming forward.
Terrific. Thank you, Gary. Further questions for Gary on any of these CPC articles? Okay, so Gary, I think I'll get up with Carrie and we'll kind of look at the schedule and figure out, we're going to start scheduling our votes for next week. So it shouldn't be too long before we hear what the outcomes are, but a really thorough and thoughtful presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Greatly
you.
appreciated. Okay, so Carrie, what are we going to do next? We're going to do wastewater. Are we doing 32 million? Are we doing the other one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hold on one second.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Katie.
Okay, we will start with transfer station.
Terrific. Hello, Rob.
So we have Rob Faley here, DPW Director, and this is for the transfer station article request, and it's for $3,400,000. And it's with, $3 million use of free cash and $400,000 for the tax levy. I will turn it over to Rob to present to you the article.
Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Rob Faley, Director of Public Works. Go over the transfer station article for this year. I'll do a quick recap too, just to tell you kind of where we've been. I think you're all familiar with it, but it shows you kind of the progress we've made also. So in spring 2023, it was $4.82 million was approved for construction. Phase 1 is the recycling area. That was the subject of my presentation today. Phase 2 was the garage and staff building. That was priority 1, and that was something that was furthered to construction. So as of last year, there was $215,000 remaining from the design contract that we carried over. So there was $5,035,000 available to do the 2 phases of construction. So again, phase 2 is the garage, staff, priority 1.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before you go any further, we appropriated money before the 23 town meeting, right?
That's correct.
Can you give us an idea from the beginning, how much we've appropriated and how much we've invested so far?
I don't have that handy. It was 2019, I believe it was.
I think
and-
that's important to all of us.
Sure. And I think
It was
maybe a later
originally
slide.
$480,000. That was originally
What year?
in 2019,
And that was how much?
$480,000.
And then the next appropriation?
There was $4,820,000.
That was the appropriation last year. So
Okay,
the
so-
original one was for design only, design and permitting.
Yes,
So-
sorry.
So far, there's. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Right. Thanks, Rob.
5.2 appropriated so far.
Correct. Over
Right,
2 town meetings.
So that 215,000 was still remaining from the original appropriation from 2019. So Phase 2 is the garage, which was priority 1 to address ADA and safety concerns for staff. It was estimated at 2.1 million. Bids were opened in 2024 for 3.8 million. So we did award that contract to J.J. Cardozi. The construction trailer is on site. The hazardous material abatement commenced. Demo began in late September 2024. We proceeded with the concrete footing work. All the site utilities were completed. Foundation walls have been put in. The steel erection now is complete. The foundation blocking has been put in, and we have started the building enclosure, which is shown in this picture. So we have had a couple of change orders as things progressed. Some of them had to do with things that we weren't aware of, like radon testing. We needed radon abatement. There were a couple of things that the planning committee, the planning board wanted to see. Came to the underwater treatment for the gutters. Instead of having them splash out onto the paved surface, they wanted to bring those underground, which was a great idea. I wish we had thought of it earlier, but it was a change order. And there were some other things like with the fuel pad. That was part of a fueling station that we had built. They wanted to see some modifications for that, and just some other minor change orders that we needed to do. One of those was for site water that we had anticipated putting in under Phase 1, and then we tabled Phase 1, so we had to do a change order to get some of that water system constructed under Phase 2. So, and then we also added construction administration, bidding, design, the final design, some of the change orders, owner's project manager, material testing, those kind of things added up to a little over $336,000. So that's where we are now. So here's Phase 1. This is the recycling area. And I'll run through the numbers in a little bit more detail a little later on. I wanted to give you just a brief overview. The recycling area was estimated at $2.72 million. You see bids came in last year at $3.17 million. So we didn't have enough money to proceed with construction. So what we did is we went back to the design table. We looked for efficiencies to lower costs. You see that green enclosed area was the area of a stump dump that was located. So we tried to minimize impacts to that area and with the revised design. So we had interviews with transfer station staff. We looked at making more efficiencies with vehicle traffic. And also we wanted to make improvements to the tipping floor. We had received a number of complaints about odor and hygiene issues at the tipping floor. So we wanted to roll those in while we had contractors on site and make that part of the next phase. So what is
Rob,
a
I'm sorry,
tipping
could
floor?
you just pop back to that slide for a quick sec?
Sure.
Can you just broadly explain what we're looking at? I
Yeah.
think we all generally know, but what's green? It looks like containers over on the left.
I've got a slide in here that I can highlight that a little bit better.
Terrific.
Okay. So the tipping floor is in the big blue building. That's where everybody dumps their municipal solid waste and the commercial haulers drop their waste. Originally in 2020, there was an estimate of $1.22 million to rehab that. It was putting some compactors in, some conveyors and things of that nature. We reduced that to just modifying the tipping floor. And you can see in the image on your right, that's the condition of the tipping floor today. The rebar is exposed. There are a lot of grooves and crevices in there that shouldn't be there. It should be a pretty smooth concrete surface. So it's just the wear and tear of years of use. It creates pockets where bacteria grows, odors and things can accumulate. It's actually kind of nasty. Our employees do power wash it on occasion. Not so much this time of year, but in the summertime, we try to do it at least once a month. But as soon as they power wash it, the liquids stay there. So it's a problem for us. So here is a brief side-by-side comparison just to show the difference between the as-bid design and the revised design. And again, I'll blow this up in a minute so you can look at it a little closer. You can see that green on the left and red on the right is that stump dump area. So we see where we tried to remove a lot of the construction impacts out of that stump dump area. But we are at a very restricted space. You know, there's only so much room that we have. Let me just, so the tipping floor is up there towards the top of your screen. That's the blue building. This is the gatehouse. This is where the scale is currently on that side of the gatehouse. It'll be relocated to this side of the gatehouse. We just figured it was easier for people that were leaving to have the driver have a face-to-face interaction with the person in the gatehouse instead of having it through their passenger side window and then people have to constantly get in and out. Just trying to look for a few efficiencies as we move along. The swap shop is relocated, so it's outside. Originally, the last design, it was right in here over the stump dump area. This gives it a little bit more easier ingress and egress because it's towards the entrance ramps. It's not where we're coming in with the scale and everything. We get that traffic removed. Currently, it's down here towards the end of the recycling area. So anybody who wants to go to the swap shop has to drive all the way through the recycling area to get there. And of course, this is the recycling area. So these are containers and compactors. You know, traffic can come in this way. They've got full access. We wanted angle parking, so we figured it was probably easier for people to back out and pull in. And then as you drive around, the same as on this side. The same kind of containers are on this side. So if this side is filled with vehicles, folks can drive around and go to the far side. And then these are all the other, like recycling textiles and all the other various containers that we have there. And this is, of course, up here is phase 2. That's the building that's being constructed now. And all of this is just, you know, mulch and brush and things of that nature. So it's really very little impact on the ground below it. Should I pause here for any questions or?
Questions? Andy, please.
I was going to say, Rob, I mean, that looks like a vast improvement for what we currently have and incorporate some features that might prevent an accident as occurred in Barnstable a week or two ago. Right, just, you know, cars parked front to back, right, and somebody backing up into a person who was walking with trash.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's just not, you know, I like the idea of the diagonal parking. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions or observations? Krista?
I may have said this last time, we discussed this last year, but I appreciate the fact that you talked to staff. I think you've got some great long-term staff there that really understand and have had a lot of thoughts about this all along. So I'm glad they're getting a decent building, and thank you for listening to and working with them.
Thank you. I mean, they see all the challenges every day. They live it every day. So who am I to tell them? It was very eye-opening to have those interviews.
Good. Tracy, please.
So this reflects, like, up above where the phase 2 is where the, like, construction debris and all of that is?
Yeah, the difficult to manage area, that's what we
Yeah.
call it. Yeah,
Okay.
that pad remains where it is today.
Just as it is, okay.
Yes.
Okay, let's see the numbers, the big reveal.
So here are the numbers. So, yeah, this is kind of an overview of what we were just talking about before, funding that was approved, the remaining from design, and then through the different pieces of construction. I did keep a $75,000 potential change order contingency for current construction, just so we didn't short ourselves. So I'd say we'd have about $650,000 remaining, and that's from the 2019 and the 2024 articles. So then if we carry that over, the new estimate for construction is 3.1 million. Tipping floor repairs are a little over 400,000. We still carry the owner's costs, the bidding, the construction, finalizing design, and a 5% contingency. That brings us to needing 3.4 million to finish construction of the transfer station.
Questions or comments? I've got one. So, given the recent operating environment, supply chain disruptions, inflation, our recent experience in bidding projects, why wouldn't we carry a 15% contingency or something, just so we don't have to come back to this a year and a half from now and find it's gone up by 25%?
So we do have the benefit of having it go out to bid once previously.
Right.
So those are real-time numbers, under a year old. And we did carry some contingencies in the cost. It's a very conservative estimate.
Yep.
So even though it's, the line item is a 5% contingency, I think we've carried enough in there with our conservative estimates to carry a slightly higher contingency than that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily 15%, but it's probably closer to 10.
Okay, you're comfortable with that? I mean, I guess I'm just sort of referring back to the 2.1 estimate, which of course was not a bid, it was an estimate, and that landed at what, 3.8?
3.7, 3.8, something like that.
Yeah. So I would just want to, if we're going to go forward with this, I would just want to make sure that we totally cover our bases. So we're, we can finish this project, not have to take it back to town meeting in a year from now, year and a half from now.
It's not my plan.
Okay. Okay. 3404 looks and say 3400. Okay, good. Eric, please.
Thank you. The tipping floor repairs, you may have given us some additional detail on this, but what does that actually mean? Is the whole thing coming out? The building stays up, obviously, but what are we doing to the floor?
So they would have to keep it open during construction. So we'd do half at a time, likely, in the off-season, of course. So we'd have to chip up the concrete. So it would be, get down to at least that bottom layer of rebar, chip it all out, clean it, and then put new rebar down and pour new concrete. So half at a time. So it does cost a lot more to do it that way, but I think there's no other way to really keep it open during construction, because concrete would have to cure. It would be a number of weeks, probably closer to a couple of months to get that rehabbed.
And is there anything different that we do this time to have it stand up better as the years go on, or is it just a reality of that kind of a
Yeah, I'm not familiar when that floor was originally installed. I mean, the amount of use it gets, it shouldn't get to this point before it's rehabbed. Yeah, it's just a wearable surface. Concrete wears out with heavy use of loaders and, scraping surfaces and things like that. We do have a rubber mat on the front of the loader bucket, so it doesn't really scrape with like a metal bucket, but it's constantly being weared upon.
Kristen.
That makes me want to ask a question then. So when it's completed, and I assume there's still some maintenance of washing down the area every so often, where does that wash water go? Is there?
So we have drains there and, retention basin, and with that gets cleaned out periodically as well.
Okay, so is that something that has to get rehabbed too, or is that still functional?
That's still functional.
Okay.
I mean, there are some, it's not just a flat slab, there are some areas where they would have to form concrete to different surfaces, but that drainage system is fully functional right now.
All right, further questions on the transfer station? If not, Carrie, where do you want to go? The debt exclusion article?
I just want to note one thing. I mentioned that it was 2019 for the first amount of 480. It was actually 470,000, and it was in 2020. It's in the staff report. I just wanted to note that, just so people knew.
Catch, thank you.
Please say that again. Sorry, Mr.
470,000, and it was in 2020. So it
Okay.
would make the whole appropriation of the 4.8 million and the 475,290,000.
That's exactly what I wanted to know, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Rob?
Oh, but wait, there's more.
Oh, yeah, that's just stating how we're going to be funding the transfer station article this coming year at annual town meeting. 3 million of free cash and 400,000 will be raised and appropriated.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bob, which one would you like to do next? These are all you.
I guess it'll be all Mark, really, so. How about the capital sewer projects? That's a shorter one, maybe a
Okay.
little easier to get through.
Sure. So we have a wastewater capital stabilization warrant article, and it is for $1,070,000. This funding would come from the wastewater capital stabilization fund and have no impact to the tax rate. The current balance in the wastewater capital stabilization fund as of January 31st was $4,973,275. And the requests are $700,000 for Stage Harbor Pump Station, $200,000 for replacement of denitrification filters. I can never say that word.
Denitrification.
And $170,000 for repairs of the original sewer collection system.
Over to you, Rob.
Okay, thank you,
Please.
Carrie, thank you. So we'll start with the Stage Harbor Pump Station. That was part of the original sewer system that's down, located in the back end of the town parking lot behind the Orpheum Theater. It was reconstructed in 2014, and at that time, it originally had 3 pumps. When it was rehabilitated, only 2 pumps were put back. They were larger pumps. They were able to handle more capacity, with the idea that a 3rd pump would be added once capacity increased to a point where that would be needed. So we are about at that point now, especially if Cedar Street Pump Station I'll be discussing here in a few minutes. But with that additional flow, we'll need that 3rd pump at the Stage Harbor Pump Station. Also includes some additional, electrical gear piping, SCADA programming, things of that nature. So design, bidding, and construction should be about $700,000. Carrie's favorite is the next, the denitrification filters air system. Oh, I'm sorry.
Andy, you had a quick question?
I mean, the Stage Harbor Pump Station, if you build Cedar Street, then what, that inflows to that Stage Harbor Pump Station?
Correct.
And the Stage Harbor Pump Station goes what, to the force main?
That's the force main to go straight to the WPCF.
Okay, all right. And then
There's like 5 force mains around town
Right.
that different pump stations pump directly there. We have capacity for, I think, 6 more. So we'll be kind of talking about that, some of the critical pump stations that we'll be adding in the future years.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to piece together the jigsaw puzzle in my head. Yeah,
Yeah, that Stage Harbor Pump Station is a very critical pump station.
yeah, thank you.
So the denitrification filters air system, it is difficult to say. So it's a critical part. This is at the Water Pollution Control Facility, where effluent comes in and you were trying to remove nitrates. It's done with through an upflow filter. I don't claim to know all the details, the day-to-day details, but I know it's with sand and compressed air. The sand is the media, and they push the effluent through with this compressed air, and the sand scours it, and it removes some of the nitrates that are common to leaching into groundwater. So this is the compressor that needs to be replaced. It's pretty old. It's just part of our planning phase to get things, keep things up and running as they should be. So it's $200,000 roughly to replace the air system. It's a very large compressor. And finally is the annual request, $170,000 to replace deficient sewer pipes and rebuild manholes. I know especially on Route 28, they take a beating, and it seems like we're out there just about every couple of years replacing a lot of those or rebuilding them. So this fund, this article helps support that. So this is the draft article, appropriate available funds from the Wastewater Capital Stabilization Fund for $1.07 million for those purposes.
Curious, I'm sorry, curious.
Excuse me. Can
has
you
this
go back to that last slide for a minute? About the cost, the next one. Next.
Oh, this one?
Yes, that one, please. Hang on just a minute.
Well, while Joanne's reading that, Carrie, has the select board voted on this?
No, they vote tonight.
Okay, so we'll hold off then.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, please.
What will be the remaining balance in the stabilization fund after this?
Roughly 3.9.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, further questions on the draft article, and what it's going to attempt to accomplish? Okay, thanks, Rob. Next.
Okay, and the next article is for the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan in the amount of $32 million, and that's for borrowing, $30 million for wastewater, and a $2 million request for grinder pumps.
Okay, so I'll just do a brief overview of where we've been. So phase one is the darker blue, approximately 4,500 parcels. And there's a reminder that phase one was initiated to target nitrogen reduction. Phase two is the lighter blue area, approximately 2,300 parcels. And that was to address the sewering in the rest of town. The area in red are areas of sewer that the town has already completed. Areas in green are areas that are either under construction or in design right now. Since 2010, $118 million has been spent on completed sewer projects.
Rob, before we jump into current construction, do you have any details on connections within the, what was it, the green area? The red area?
For
Well, in terms of notices dispatched by the town and connections, kind of notices complied with?
Well, for all the red area, notices have been sent out. Some of it was the existing sewer system that was downtown on Main Street.
Yep.
Some of it is areas that it's been expanded. Some of the green areas, we are on the cusp of sending out notices, working with the Board of Health to send out notices. But that's only a partial green area. All the red areas, notices have been sent out already.
Do we roughly know how many notices that is and how many have been complied with?
We do. I don't have that with me, but we do
I'll
keep
put it on the
numbers.
list and we can track it down. I think we'd be most interested in that. Thank you. Joanne?
When you send out the notices, the demand notices, do you send information about what programs are available for them to borrow money as far as borrowing from the county? And the other way is through the state, you can file a reimbursement for money you've spent on a mandated sewer or septic system. That's Schedule Z, and I keep mentioning that every year, and I never see the town say anything about that state. It lasts over 4 years. They'll give you a fourth it's a tax credit, let's put it that way. Does the town do any information to the people who need to connect?
So the Board of Health sends out those notices, and you'll have to forgive me, since I've been here, we haven't sent out any, because like I said, we're on the cusp of sending some out. So I don't know exactly what's involved, but I know we are working on kind of a public information campaign to get that information out there to all the
Yeah,
residents.
I think that would be helpful to a lot of people. I don't think many people know about the state tax credit for it.
Well, I appreciate that. So for current construction activity, I'll use my pointer here. 1D2A is a CC Construction is just doing their punch list item. That's the pump station on Twinefield and another one on Meeting House Road, and covers Meeting House Road and Middle Road and a portion of Mill Hill Road. Again, that's just about completed now. 1E2 is the Old Mill Boatyard Sewer Extension. That's in here down in purple. It's kind of hard to see, but that covers Old Stage Harbor Road, and there's a pump station down by the Harbor Master's garage that is being worked on. Most of the road work is done. We're just completing the pump station. Hopefully we'll have that up and running in about 6 months or so, and all those notices will go out as well at that time. 1C5 is in blue here. That's the Oyster Pond Sewer Extension. CC Construction has that job. It's not encompassing all of this area, but it's a good portion of it. And then the Mill Pond Pump Station, which is adjacent to the pier that they're looking for funding for. That's a 50-year-old pump station that we're refurbishing. That should be done. We're hoping it's up and running by the summer. So for the next phases of implementation, we are continuing to address nitrogen loading and growth. In the short term, we're looking at expanding some of our gravity systems, and the long-range plan is to address pump station locations. And these are some of the areas that we're looking at, and I'll break them down individually as we go forward. So Phase 1F1, funding for this article would include design, bidding, and construction. There's a pump station on Cedar Street that we want to install and complete. We'd look to put that out to bid, finish the design sometime this fall, put it out to construction in the spring of '26. This is the area for 1F1 on Cedar Street. The pump station is proposed on a town-owned parcel in this little triangle here, and it would address sewering the entire area in pink, approximately 69 parcels. This pump station would be critical to pick up all the other areas closer to the water from there that would pump up to Cedar Street. Cedar Street would then pump up to Stage Harbor. Also in Phase 1F is we want to tie in some of the smaller gravity neighborhoods that were passed over previously. This here is Route 28. It's served by gravity all throughout. So all these areas in green are all neighborhoods that we can easily tie into the main trunk line. They wouldn't need grinder pumps. There may be a couple of parcels here and there that are lower than the road, but for the most part, it would all be a gravity system. Those are the two areas, our Phase 1F1, that we would like to promote going to construction in 2026. There's also Phase 1F2, which includes, this article would include design, bidding, and construction, although we may have to piecemeal the construction depending on where we are and what bids are coming in at for the $32 million. This would be, this is the Oyster River here. Oyster Pond would be up in here. So this is the Barn Hill Road area. I think this is a yacht basin here and another boatyard down here. So it's a mix of gravity and low pressure. Our biggest challenges here would be locating pump stations. That's kind of been our challenge all along, is trying to find suitable locations for pump stations. Again, another 87 parcels. This is Harding Beach Road. That would be an easier area because we already have a pump station at that location. So this would be tying in gravity to that pump station. Also, as part of 1F2 would be the Katy Ford area. This is George Ryder Road here, Katy Ford in this neighborhood. We would propose a small pump station at this cul-de-sac, and then the rest of it would be through gravity. There's an existing pump station down here off of George Ryder Road. So looking even further ahead, we would go out and look for SRF funding in 2027, possibly around a $40 million request to address water going into Pleasant Bay. So sewer shed area 20, which is this yellow area here, would house pump station 20, and that's another critical pump station that would be directly piped right to the water pollution control facility. Off of 20, there's a lot of neighborhoods that would be the linchpin for all of those areas. So area 17 and 18 are these areas in blue. That's where the middle school is, Enterprise Drive, the commercial area. They would all pump into pump station 20, and they would follow suit just after pump station 20 area was developed. Looking even further down the road, all of these areas in green would all go to pump station 20. So you can see how critical pump station 20 is to kind of that whole Shore Road, North Chatham area to make that successful. And 2 years in the future from that one, 2029 SRF request, we would be looking at pump station 73, which would sewerage this area in yellow here. Again, the adjacent areas in blue would be soon after that, and then the areas in green would be soon after that. So another critical pump station to try to develop in that area. So this is the draft article for $32 million, design, renovation, and construction for the various projects. I can keep this up here. I don't know if you want me to read it, but I've got a couple more slides to get through.
I don't think you need to read it. I think we can take our opportunity. That's also in our package. But Rob, if you get to the end of 1F2, which I think is covered by the $32 million that's being requested. Do you have
You mean on the slides or back?
Yeah, no, well, your phase 1F2. Yeah. So if you get to that point, do you have any sense of what percentage of the buildings in town will be on the sewer once all those connections are made? Back in the envelope?
Yeah, no, I have to crunch some numbers for you, but
Okay,
it still would be less than half.
less than half. Okay, all right. Other questions, Andy?
I think, how much of this is still being driven by what may be a watershed permit determination?
A lot of it.
Okay.
I mean, that's,
I mean, my understanding of it is that the state essentially is saying, we are generating too much nitrogen for all the coastal embayments here, some of them more so than others. And so, enclosed embayments presumably need to be addressed sooner than, wide open ones that are, subject to the famous, dilution of our tides. But, is that tie-in any way to the way it's phased?
yeah, absolutely. So the reason why we switched to the Pleasant Bay embayments, because the way our comprehensive wastewater management plan is written, after so many years, I think it's 15 years, the points that you apply for, that you're eligible for the intended use plan, they start to drop off. So we want to make sure we're going to be viable for the future. So instead of, staying on our southern coastal embayments the way we've been developing sewer, we're shifting our focus to the north for about a 5 or 6 year period, and then we're coming back to the south when our new comprehensive wastewater management plan will be written and approved.
Any forecasting from the state as to what that might look like?
Not at this point, no.
Yeah, okay, all right. Because, they've been playing around with the idea of requiring, denitrifying septic systems and, very broadly, right, across the Cape. And so far, we've managed to dodge that bullet, amongst other things, because we have this sewering program that we started so many years ago and still have so many years to go.
Yeah, and it affects so many different levels. It affects, every septic system is dumping PFAS into the groundwater, because we can't, it's in everything we use every day. And so you have all these little hundreds and thousands of little possible PFAS contaminators out there with every individual septic system. So, you know, it's so many different levels, impacts that we have to really keep furthering this along.
Well, it certainly is noticeable that our coastal waters have deteriorated significantly. And, you know, this is as aggressive as we have been in following this program. You know, we're probably, 30 years behind the ball. Be a guess, right?
We're in better shape than a lot of our surrounding
yes.
communities, but
We
yeah,
sure are.
it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is wonderful. I think the sewering is just barely a second to fresh water for the town in importance, and to keep our mind on what it's going to cost us, the fact that we don't want to back down because it has to be done, and be able to compare this cost and the importance of it versus other costs that might come along the way. But this presentation is excellent, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, further questions or observations for Rob? If not, I'd like to just have Carrie walk us through a little bit about kind of how this works from a financing perspective, and debt exposure and debt service and the financial end of all of this as it's kind of currently envisioned.
Sure. I just want to answer Joanne's question from earlier about the properties. For completed sewer construction contracts to date, there's 823 plus properties have been ordered to connect. Some properties have connected due to septic system issues or new construction on a case-by-case basis. 646 connections have been completed to date. That is 78% rate of connection. There are an additional 166 properties in process which have either applied for a permit, awaiting a permit, or awaiting a contractor. And that's also in your budget book that you have received as well under the wastewater project. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Thank you. Thanks
Just-
a lot.
You're welcome.
Just one note, a
Okay.
side note, that does not include the original sewer system in town. That's since 2013.
Okay, good to
Okay,
know.
so-
Thank you. All right, so $32 million. $30 million will be applied to the SRF funding, which, so SRF funding, we sometimes get subsidies, so it could be less than $30 million, obviously. So we don't know that amount until we actually apply and get the funding and go through the whole process. So then we get a preliminary loan schedule, which sits on our debt schedule under short-term loans for like a year until we finally get a final schedule from the Clean Water Trust. It would be a 0% loan for the $30 million, so there's no interest that we would have to pay on that. On a $30 million note for 20 years, that's $1,500,000 each year, but again, we don't know what our subsidies would be, so it would probably be considerably a lot less than that on a $30 million note. The $2 million note, that would be for the grinder pumps that's not eligible for the SRF funding. So that would be, I have it over here somewhere. For a 20-year loan note at, which is high, I'm going to estimate at 4.5%, and that is high right now. On our current evaluation, it would be $190,000 for the first year. That would be, principal would be $100,000, and interest would be around $90,000. It would be 16.29 on $1 million single-family home. So it's, and then on a $1.5 million home, it would be 24.44 on the tax rate. And this is just for, what? $24? Yeah, this is for the full amount, though. This is if we borrow for the full amount. It would be 2 cents on the tax rate.
And you anticipating straight line amortization of the principal? So $1 million a year for 20?
Yeah, it would be $100,000.
100, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go through the tax rate part of it again, please.
So the tax rate increase on the average tax bill would be $16.29.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And where are we relative to the select board and the water and sewer commissioners and the grinder pump? I know that various recommendations have been made, hearings have been held.
It's tonight.
They're, just to be clear, they're voting tonight on whether to subsidize the acquisition of the grinder pumps for those who need them in town.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions?
Further comments or questions? Okay, well, we've got a little show tonight here at 5:30, at least I do. And I appreciate all the input on the report. It's very helpful. Anybody wants to show up and prop me up, you're more than welcome to. And if not, we'll see you when we see you. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Tommy Doan, in favor? Tommy?
He's frozen.
He's frozen.
He's froze. Tommy's froze. John Papalardo?
Yes.
Joanne Sprague?
Yes.
Andy Young?
Yes.
Kristen Andres?
Yes.
Tracy Shields?
Yes.
Eric Whiteley?
Yes.
Chairs in favor. All right, Rob, thank you very much. Carrie, thank you.